Hey everyone, hope you're doing good. Welcome from Paris. My name is Nawras. I'm doing my Middle Eastern Studies degree or master degree at Lund University, Sweden, and I was asked by Mustafa to speak to you about a topic that I find interesting and then I really believe that you would find interesting as well. The topic that I'm about to bring forth today is, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but then again, I'm also sure that a lot of you maybe didn't hear about it before, haven't heard it before. It's called Orientalism. It's a big topic and it's not new. It's been around for centuries actually, but it's not defined. And luckily, we had this Palestinian of a Palestinian region thinker, Edward Said, who introduced this term to us as in the way we know it today. So Orientalism, this concept actually, at least in Said's mind, and I know that a lot of you are familiar with him, has been coined by him in the academia, and this is important that you know that, because what I want to stress here that I want you to be students, and I'd really like you to fight the fight that you're fighting now, along with Mustafa, because it's worth it. So again, the concept of Orientalism inside its mind was coined in academia, which was the den, let's say, as he was a fellow at CASBS, which is the Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University, California. So this guy basically speaks about the Orientalization of the Orient. We know the Orient, everybody knows that. Said's argument is that the Orient has been and is still actually being Orientalized. And how? He argues that there is this fixed way of looking at the Orient through a lens that has like witnessed no change. There's no change in this lens, basically, neither in color nor in shape, and which has been manufactured. So this lens has been manufactured by a systematic and organized repertoire, he calls it, of institutions, books, paintings, travelogues, you name it, journals of both explorers and Orientalists who are guys who go to the Middle East basically and to study it or just for mere pleasure. Thinkers who visited the Middle East at one point in time. So this lens, what does it do? This lens magnifies the picture of the East as this child that needs to be guided by hand towards a garden, say, of intellectual, economic, and humanistic advancement, where he, the child, the Middle East, becomes an offspring of the West. So it's an East-West dichotomy. It's East-West fight, if you want, through books and travelogues and journals that are written by these thinkers who have been to the Middle East, or the East, let's say. So this view, Said argues, has been largely cocooned, like we said, in books of travelers and explorers of the Orient, and later cinematic Hollywood stunts. And you probably watched the film Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford. This is a typical Orientalist approach where he just grabs a gun and shoots a guy who's trying to fight him in a decent fight, let's say, with a sword. So yeah, for those who didn't watch the film, go watch it. You'll know what I'm talking about. So this motivation or this picture, let's say, this picture that has been coined by travelogues, books, and paintings of a lustful woman who's naked and waiting to be sold For instance, this helped the West indulge itself in a set of colonialist campaigns against the East, starting from Napoleon Bonaparte until the War on Terror in 2003 against Iraq, for instance. So this is important that you know. It was paved. It was a gradual shift. It was paintings. It was a look of the West towards the East, and then it became a colonialist approach. So this view or conclusion that Said draws comes from his readings or specialty in reading the English literature, as he was a major in English literature. So he created his version, let's say, of Orientalism. Now, Said likes to look at his book as a book about culture, ideas, even history, although I would not agree, and power, rather than Middle Eastern politics, let's say. So he names it, he uses his Palestinian background to sort of make a stance, defend his Palestinian people in a humanistic approach, actually, and I'll explain why in a minute. Yet he does not seem, because he does that, because he focuses on the Palestinian issue and the cause and reminds us of it in this book, Orientalism, or in many other books, he kind of forgets about the Orient. He does not include India, for instance. He does not speak that much of India, and this is important that you know as well. Now, so like we said, having a Palestinian background seems to be trying to counterattack, let's say, the collective approach of the West in understanding the Middle East as it is, for the mere purpose of dominance. We want to understand you not because we want to understand you, but because we want to dominate you. And this is really present until now, and you can figure out that yourselves. Now, what readers of Said usually misinterpret is, or miss, is his humanistic critique, meaning that Said is really trying to promote for an intellectual exchange, if you want, because, and a proof to that, in his book he calls terms like the Holocaust, and we all know the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. He calls something like the Holocaust as being, he describes it as being justly. So a historical event like that, a description of this historical event as being justly, means that he really he really understands the things he's talking about, right? So now this Holocaust, what I wanna stress here, has become an abstract idea, right? So Said moves on to pose a question, which is, if this Holocaust, now an abstract idea as it may be, could justly alter our conscience, right, towards the Jewish cause, why can't a historical fact like imperialism, and we all know what imperialism is, alter our conscience? Why? The answer one can fathom is because imperialism is still posing its hegemony on us in the form of ideological Orientalism, as he puts it. Thus, it would not be seen as a conscious changer until it has become an abstract. I don't know if you're following here, but it's really important that you delve into this book in order for you to understand what I'm trying to say here. Now, accordingly, we see that Said does not hesitate to identify with the Jewish Holocaust in a try to either either to genuinely promote for a humanistic approach in which the bridging, we're talking about bridging of cultures, and getting rid of this image of the Orient as being the child, or the naked woman, or the slave, or the region that can be dominated. He's trying to spread awareness of this Western look towards the Orient, or in particular the Middle East, actually. So events like the civil war in Lebanon, the 9/11 attacks, the Iraqi freedom war on terror, amongst many other, are not merely, according to him, a clash of civilizations. Now, we're not talking about the Eastern civilization against the Western civilization. No, rather it is an outcome. These wars, all of these events, are an outcome, or perhaps a reflection, of the collective contempt. There's a contempt empowered by dominance, hegemony, and hence othering. There's a sense of othering. You're not one of us, you're one of them. Them, us, we, they, like that. So it is much deeper than that, what I'm trying to say. So this contempt is manifested, and I quote, in the looting, pillaging, and destruction of the libraries of the museums of 7,000-year-old civilizations of Iraq, for example, during the Iraqi freedom war on terror. Now, this is definitely true, and because it is a game of power, like you can imagine, and not a mere clash of civilizations. There's someone who is trying to oppress, dominate, use hegemony, even economically, to manipulate the other, right? So, although this might be true, what Said seems to fail in advancing coherently is that, and this is my own view actually, that the concept of both Orientalism, the look of the West towards the East, and Occidentalism, which is the West, the look of the East towards the West, should always be observed in their historical context, which means that we should always look at things historically, not like he does, employing his literary skills or skills in reading literature, because he was an English literature major, right? So we have to deal with history here. So again, like this concept of Orientalism and Occidentalism should always be observed in their historical context, and not only looked at through a lens of textual, that is, we read the text and we understand it the way we want, right? Textual context that serves the purpose of hegemony. Since for example, I'll give you an example as a clarification here, what the Muslim world sees or considers futuhat, right, of the Andalus, this is the same thing is considered by the West as conquests, right? So it's a matter of perspective, really, and how you look at things based on your affiliation with a group or another. You can put it this way. So, and what the West also considers crusades. In fact, George W. Bush calls the Iraqi freedom war on terror a crusade. The East considers, on the other hand, occupations, right? So again, it's a matter of perspective. So this Orientalism, Occidentalism, the East and the West should always looked at from an objective historical point of view, not from a sensual or a point of view where you sort of affiliate with yourself with a cause, like Said does with the Palestinian issue, for instance. So contextual, which deals with space and time, not only texts. rather than textual analysis should be taken into consideration, because cultural differences again are not merely coined by a set of travelogues. It's way beyond that, right? I don't think that I don't I don't believe in that actually, like as Said bravely suggests. It is deeply rooted through time and space, and that is why we have to look at it. And furthermore, and I want to add a very important issue here, one cannot deny that the West, what we call the West, has actually been able to make a leap with regard to moral values. And I want to talk extensively here, but maybe time does not allow us. Moral values that were not an outcome of contempt, as he imagines, or Said imagines, of other cultures, rather are largely deeply, these are largely a contempt of one's own culture. We all know about the Middle Ages and how dark Europe was, and etc., etc. So this is a contempt of one's own culture. The East does not play a role here, and thus can be seen to be in favor for a better and comprehensively humane livelihood for and within the Western societies. They want to better themselves, right? They want to make themselves better. So from, like, for example, take the acceptance of homosexuals in the making, at least, to the partial liberation of women, and I say partial because it is partial, to the protective laws of unified family and the fight against child abuse, etc. These are all moral values that the West worked on, because this is an outcome of a contempt of its own culture, right? So these are values that have become values because of a fight that started by rendering perhaps unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which are God's, meaning approaching a secularist approach, or following a secularist approach. I'm sorry. So this fight has not been even, like, if a fight like that has not been even taken, we wouldn't have gotten these values now, what we call values now. So these are not approached, in my perspective, in the Middle East at least yet. So to sum up, really, moral relativism, which is relative, of course, is a fact. And there should be no controversy about it. What you see as, I want to give you an example actually here. So take for example polyandry, which is a woman marrying multiple partners. This is looked at in the Middle East as being the most unthinkable decadence in any woman's behavior, right? This act is acceptable in some rural areas in the Tibet, right? Due to multiple socioeconomic factors. So these guys have to do that for some reason, and you want to check it out. It's really interesting. In this sense, one cannot go about and assume that the West has instilled or even bolstered this habit by means of travelogues. Like, a man does not marry multiple women because the West wants that, right? You can't say that. As Edward, like Said, maybe implicitly suggests, and you may read him, because to a postmodernist West, really the concept of polygyny, on the other hand, which is a man, like we said, marrying multiple women, has become an alien to the West, as the concept of polyandry has always been an alien to Middle Easterners. So, and even before the rise of Islam. Thus, like, I want to say here, when drawing a concrete line between any two given cultures, especially when one of these cultures embraces a certain set of values that come mainly from religious exegesis, moral relativism again has got to be taken into consideration. So I wanna just like wrap up here really fast. So by saying that, and the Napoleon Bonaparte campaign against Egypt was a major, like, was a starting point actually that Said uses when saying that everything that Napoleon and de Lesseps learned about of the East came from books written in the tradition of Orientalism. Said actually implicitly refutes the existence of an imperialist approach throughout the history of man, regardless of whether you're a Muslim, a Christian, a Western, or an Eastern. Man wants to occupy man. That's, I believe, just a common rule of thumb, maybe. An approach, this approach that brought with it an immediate observation of the nature of to be colonized. This is what should be taken into consideration. It's not just books that were written and read by Napoleon, and then it sort of motivated him to occupy the Orient. It's much deeper than that, I believe. So Said's, in this sense, refuses, like his refusal, in other words, culminates when Said deterministically labels every study of the Orient as a try to orientalize it. So, say I'm doing my Middle Eastern studies, right? Like, whether directly or indirectly, I am being an Orientalist and I'm looking down on the Middle East. This is what Said is basically saying, which is highly far-fetched in my opinion. In this regard, one can claim also that in the same manner that Columbus orientational conjecture led him to not only dub the indigenous Taino, they're called Taino tribes of the San Salvador, as Indians, because he was going to discover India, right? And he just like happened to stumble upon a bunch of people and he called them Indian, while they weren't Indians. This Columbus labeling is pretty much similar to me to Said's labeling of every scholar or research that's been done on the East to be an Orientalist. And that's an adjective to describe someone who looks down, like we said, on the Middle East or the Orient in general. So this is overgeneralistic, I believe, and I think that Said, a great thinker as he may be, like not failed really, maybe did not mention that or put it properly to us as readers. Having said that, I want to thank you for listening, and I'm sorry if I took too long from your time. I wish you all the best indeed there is, and I wish you to be safe and prosperous, and carry on your studies with all the zeal you have, and I'm sure Mustafa will guide you through all the difficulties that you might come upon. Thank you. Cheers.